Okay. Good morning. This is Ron. It's Saturday, December 28th. The year is about over. Uh Hope everybody had a good some time off and opportunity to visit and spend with family and friends. So uh here we are. Do we have any questions? How was your week? Anything you want to talk about? Questions or comments? No one? Okay. Uh I look at things and I try to see where we are and what we should be talking about, or just to kind of feel something. Some scripture came to me. If nobody else has anything to discuss or mention, uh, I was looking at the seventh chapter of Daniel. As you know, this is Daniel in captivity, and I don't do the verse by verse thing anymore, unless something you guys see in that. But I think as as distorted as the scriptures can be, because as we've discussed many times, the manipulation of them and what has gone on uh throughout history and trying to present this thing to look a certain way. uh I don't think they could take the truth out of them. And I think that goes hand in hand. I think it goes hand in hand with where we are now, trying to see and understand uh, life from the beginning, our spirituality, and get a glimpse of who we are and what it means to say we are God's. Uh, so as we understand this, I think the scriptures go hand in hand with what we were studying in Mayot. Why? Because I think it gives us some more detail into these quote unquote stories of truth that we've been studying over the years. And even though the manipulation is done, I appreciate the wisdom that the Creator gives us to find ourselves in it, find the truth that is in there, and not look at the distortion of it. So, a couple verses in the seventh chapter of Daniel caught my eye. It says, I'm looking at verses 13 and 14. This is Daniel's talking. He said, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, the clouds of heaven, one like the Son of Man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the people, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away. His kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So this is presented to us in a way that it sounds very religious, as we've been taught to understand it, and it speaks to the dominion of man at the male, I guess, and how this is written. Uh, Everything with power and authority is masculine. So, but as we have discovered who we are and looking at this and trying to see ourselves first from the spiritual side or the soulful side rather than the mindful side, does this speak to you? Does this say anything to you? What do you see here? I guess the first thing that jumped out to me is the night vision. Uh, that's you know, in other words, I'm seeing something in darkness. I'm pulling things out that uh that speaks to me of what we've done and what we do every day. You're pulling something out of darkness. We talk about the spirit being hovering over the face of the deep. He talks of his night visions. And like I say, I did not go all the way into all of this, but that first verse, the first sentence part of that verse is what really got my attention. Uh, I kept looking into the night vision, uh, and I see that pointing to us in the time and the day that we are now. What appears to be enlightenment in the earth is not enlightenment at all. I just as I looked at this again, uh, night vision speaks of something that he's trying to make uh, gain some insight into something that's not clear to him, that is confusing, but he's pulling out of it the truth that and what it means, which to me kind of sums up where we are now and what we've been doing is pulling something out of the night, especially after the election. We could have tanked it. We could have said, hey, you know what, this didn't go our way. I don't see this anymore. I'm disappointed. I'm upset and kind of pulled in the tent. But everybody, after we got through the emotional part of it, we start to look at who and where we are. And that to me is looking into the night vision, looking at this and saying, you know what, we missed this, or we didn't see this, or maybe we didn't miss it. Maybe if we think about it from this perspective, maybe it was meant for us to go down that path so that we could be here right now. So if we believe and we say there are no such things as coincidences, then we did not miss this at all. And so it was done so that we can get a better vision, not only of who we are, but to go back to looking at things from the inside. The perspective is from the inside, from the soul, not from the outside inviting in. So that brought us back on track. And I just saw these verses are speaking to us today. Does anybody else have a comment or anything on this?
Can you read it again, Ron?
Yes,
Sorry.
ma'am. I'm in Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. It says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the people, nations, and the men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. That's verses 13 and 14 in 7th chapter Daniel.
Can I tell you what when you first read it, it really resonated with me in terms of when you said the Ancient of Days.
Yes.
So why wasn't it translated as God or Yahweh or whatever? To me, it sounds like it's giving a clue about Ptah and Ra coming up out of Ptah.
Yeah,
So that's what it sounds like to me.
it does, Audrey. This speaks to us right now.
Yeah.
And I intentionally, uh, well, no, I don't want to say that because I want you guys to say what you see, not what I see. And I appreciate what Audrey says, but I see the tie-in. To me, that's the night vision. As I said, I think the scripture, if you will, gives us examples of patah and understanding kinetic energy and what that looks like, and help us to be action and be energized. So I see these truths that we pull out of this as giving us examples and helping us see who we are. That's where I was hoping to go to with this. Um, Thank you, Audrey. Anyone else?
Yeah, good morning, Ron. Good morning,
Sir,
everyone.
how are you?
This is GC, and I concur with both of you. I think that, again, when you mentioned the first verse, I keep looking in the night visions, and I too just, was reflecting on the womb seed. And when we talk about the womb seed in the darkness, in the richness of that matter, in the richness, of that energy, again, it takes us through, that process of being able to appreciate, um, the Shabaka stone, and more importantly, even talking about vision. I don't think that we are just looking at it now just from the light, which has its significance, but we're looking at it from the darkness. We're looking at it from that aspect that we didn't, necessarily saw it at that time, but there's just something that's in the amniotic fluid. There's something that's in that substance. There's something that's in that richness now that we are experiencing, that's now opening us up to another appreciation of, I think you had said it earlier in another session, how wonderful and marvelously we are made
We are made. Yes.
in that darkness, you know what I mean? In that substance. And again, I think something else was mentioned maybe 2 weeks ago. I think it was Evelyn mentioned about the 6 electrons, the 6 protons, and the 6 neutrons in terms of the number 666. But in the darkness of it all is that carbon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Element. It is
Yeah.
that melanated element. So I think that, again, there's something that's in this scripture. And I think a little later on, where you had mentioned about glory and kingdom, it made me think about seek ye first the
Yeah.
kingdom of Ptah and his righteousness, right? And
Yeah.
all things shall be added. So I think we're starting to experience it from another realm of our spirituality. I just want to share those thoughts. I'm done.
Beautifully said, George.
Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I'm a little late getting on, so could you just tell me the scripture, please?
Yes, ma'am. I read Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, and I was asking, what do we see in this? Do you see yourselves in this? The part of this that got my attention when I first read it was the night visions. What are the night visions? That to me spoke to me and where we are today. And this is some not only re revealing something to us, it is showing us the authority that we have to be who we are and do what we do. So I love this. Pastor, we on Daniel's chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. And anybody else who might be coming in late. What do you see here?
Thank
And
you.
and as Audrey and George have said, what we're looking at making a attempt to do is the scriptures gives us details of what life should be to us in a spiritual sense, as far as being patah, as being experiencing this comedic energy, what that means. So as we pull truth out of these words, we enlighten and inflame that which is in us. So that's what the attempt is, to look at these verses and gain that kind of insight from.
I'm sorry, again, I came in a little late. Did you talk about I heard, I think part of what Audrey said, and then your summation now, and then George said, did you talk about the night visions as it relates to wisdom and being able to not look at just what you see externally, but the internal vision of what night means? It means wisdom. Darkness means wisdom. And to me, it talks about, the internal, looking internally, because that's who you are originally. That's what Patah is. It's not based on actions, based on what it sees with the external eyes, but internally based on who it sees itself and who we see ourselves as, and who we understand that we are in terms of divinity. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you. The night vision is the wisdom. We do not fear the night vision. Okay. Anyone else? Verses 13 and 14 in chapter 7. You think I can't remember who said it. It may have been Barbara, Kathy, Audrey. One of them talked about the upcoming inauguration, the upcoming new year. We are being empowered to see ourselves and to be who we are supposed to be. And I think Pastor kind of summed it up last week when he said something along those same lines. We are being, this is our empowerment, or coming out, or however he said it. I don't remember. But I want us to see ourselves, and I something dawned on me this week, because I've had some time off and with doing some meditating. It is very easy to start off looking at your mind, because that's the part of us that we are most comfortable with and most familiar with. We are not as familiar with our souls and going to that place. And that is sort of been, I look at it as walking into my house. It is a house that I have built, a house that I am familiar with, but I'm more familiar with some rooms than I am others in that house. So I dare to open that room that I know that only goodness and righteousness lies, and it is mine. It is there for me. It is there for me, and it has been there since ancient times. And it is the building block of who I am, because it was put there by the Creator. It was put there by the ancestors. It was put there by me, because we're all one. So as we look at this, I want us to just take a look, as Barb just said, at yourself from the inside. Look at who you are, and not be afraid of the night visions, and seeing yourself being empowered. The clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. That is a religious statement, one like the Son of Man. But that is saying I have seen the vision of who I am. I have seen that I am Patah. I have seen that I am seeing myself coming out of the waters, seeing myself being coming out of darkness, seeing myself with the power and the authority that man needs to be free. So this is not even an invitation, but an opening up of self, and looking at self from a perspective that we've been trying to get to for a very long time. Pastor?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm here and I just got on. However, when you talked about the Son of Man, there's one thing that I noticed about the book of Daniel. It has a lot of Aramaic words that were translated. They had a lot of words that were translated from the Aramaic, even though the predominant words were translated from the Hebrew language. And when the Aramaic used the word "son of man," that word translates as human, as opposed to son.
Yeah.
So if we are looking at this from the Aramaic, then it would be "I saw the human," as opposed to the Son of Man.
Okay.
And that gives us greater clarity, and it really gives us uh, an understanding that, as you said, religion doesn't when it references the Son of Man, because it references the Son of Man as being an individual person as opposed to humanity.
Human.
Yeah.
That's a better fit to what we were trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Pastor, because when I looked back at it a second time just a while ago, I was thinking, wait, that's talking about all of us,
Yeah.
each of us. Because if we come into the truth, that's the kingdom that nobody can destroy or diminish. So any of us can come into that kingdom. So it's talking about all of us or any of us.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else? What do you see here?
So that means that you you have to see the truth in order for you to have the authority to reach the sun, to reach humanity with the truth. Meaning that you don't get to this place, get to the space rather, where you are able to bring deliverance to humanity unless you have the humility to submit yourself to the truth. And when you do that, that comes with a self-admission. And that self-admission is that I have been wrong, without blaming anybody for you being wrong. Because those who taught us were not wrong intentionally. However, we have this opportunity to make a difference, but you have to be humble to do that. You can't be as haughty as our religious leadership is, or political leadership for that matter, and expect to be able to see truth, because the Creator is not going to allow you to see it because your heart is not right. So that idea of dominion or sovereignty is you having, as Audrey said, sovereignty over the truth. That's your kingdom that you are have sovereignty over. And when I said being haughty as the religious leadership, if you really think about religious leadership, it is just as haughty and arrogant as any politician. So all of them are the same thing. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions? Is this making sense? Okay. Um, George touched on this as well, and I'm Pastor brought new meaning when we look at Son of Man. This is empowering, and it should open some, take the blinders off our eyes if they're there, to see ourselves in this and to bring life to this, which we've read probably many times, but never seen ourselves in it. But he came up to the Ancient of Days. He came up to the Ancient of Days. What is that saying to you? Yes, we know all.
It's saying when I process that and I think about ancient is speaking to something that's old, old in terms of it having existed for quite some time. And when you look at the Ancient of Days in relationship to enlightenment, in relationship to Bada or Elohim talking to the Son of Man, talking to the human, what I see is he came to the Ancient of Days, meaning that he came through the ancient truths or the perpetual truth that has always been here. Because days also comes from a root that means to be perpetual, to be continuous.
Yes, sir. It also, Pastor, and you guys speak to this, talks about being original.
Yes.
It talks about the original. Now think about that. All this stuff that has happened throughout history and what it has done with how man has recreated and shaped God into what it needed him to be. It talks about being original. And
All right, right.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Not what he needed him to be, but what he wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. Because right now, we are, I am. I am what you need me to be when you need it. I am to you what you need at that moment, not what you want. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to make that a bit clear.
No, I appreciate it. I want you to tie this up too. Original again, and as we try to open that up, what that means, original, what was in the beginning, what was in the beginning, and the power and authority and the intent that was in the beginning. But it says it derives from a root, which means to either advance or to remove. To advance or to remove. So tie that up, because I think when we open up and looked at Son of Man, that this is very personal. And what do you guys see in this?
When you say ancient, something older, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Which word?
Ancient of Days. I'm looking up the word ancient.
Okay, and
Yes,
repeat
sir.
that again, please.
I'm saying it means old, and it means something original, it also talks about something being vulnerable, or it comes from a root though that means to advance or to remove.
Okay.
And that's what I just look at that, looking at the new clarity, or the clarity that you brought anyway to Son of Man, pulling all that together.
I think that it brings, when we talk about to be removed, that's, I see more than one thing involved in that, because truth does more than one thing. Truth removes the scales from your eyes, and truth also removes the fog from your way of thinking. Truth also um, allows your journey to be continued. What do I mean by that? Every person on the face of the earth is on a journey, and as this journey is traveled, you are influenced by your environment. You get engaged in religion, but your journey does not stop. Your journey continues. And when you get to the place where you begin to raise questions, and because the religion is not making sense to you, then what happens is you begin to change the course of your journey. And as you change the course of your journey, you are in the process of removing yourself from a religious environment. And when you embrace truth, and when I say embrace, I mean wholeheartedly, then that embrace, the embracing of truth is what opens your eye. It removes the cloudiness from your eye, the scale from your eye. And that removes the scale and places you in the midst of truth. This journey of truth, you've been traveling it, but you couldn't see it because you were blinded by religion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You
So-
you were on the wrong pathway, as we put it.
So and I think I'm saying the same thing, and I'm trying to talk about the people on this phone right now, Pastor, and help me with this. I see this as taking us back. The vulnerability was taking us back to look and see, you know what, this is not what I thought it was. I don't know where I am now. I don't know, because I think we had these discussions. I'm kind of confused as to what God looks like. I don't know who to pray to, because these things were not what we had pictured them to be or had in our mind for them to be. So the Ancient of Days to me is what took us back to looking at, I think we started off looking at African history, and because I remember talking about the Dogons and kings and queens of Africa, and it led us, you and George, to take us back even further to show us what, what beginning looked like as far as understanding the empowerment of who we are, and how we walked up here. So I think I'm saying the same thing you are. I'm just trying to look at it from a personal perspective and looking at the journey that we have taken.
Well, and I see that clearly. The vulnerability of it is real. If you don't accept the reality that of being vulnerable, then you don't see truth. The vulnerability comes when you lose your arrogance. That's when you become vulnerable. What are the vulnerabilities? There are several, but there are some that are easier to see. You are vulnerable too, because now you have opened yourself up for attack from religion. You are vulnerable because you are in a place where family begins to move away from you because they think you're in a cult. And you have to overcome that vulnerability. And you cannot do that unless you are truly committed to what was, is, and shall always be. And that is truth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think George was about to say something. He came on twice.
Yeah, and good morning. You know,
Good
I just
morning.
to connect with what Pastor was saying in reference to looking at the ancient days, and when we were given the principles of Mayat, when we think about the earliest writings of spirituality and morality, which was 2,000 years before, the Christianity, the Cosmic Mother gave us the foundation for our roadmap in terms of it being the primary writings, or how can I say it, in terms of the primary writings with regards to living. And I think that in these principles, we're saying the word truth. But what does it mean from the Kemetic teachings? And it talks about, the importance that all living creatures are sacred and are spiritual beings deserving respect and honor. So when we think about the principles of Mayat, and it talks about truth, then what are we talking about? Based in fact, with honesty and integrity. And so we're giving these principles to live by. And as we become more aware of the 42 laws and affirmations, is giving us more substance. But if everything originated from the waters of none, then I think that whatever may have been taken from that and transformed into another way of saying it, that it still was originated from the beginning. And so when I look at, Ron, when you was talking about the ancient days, it just made me reflect on, what was the earliest writings and recordings in terms of morality. And when we look at, when we look at truth, it talks about it in the sense of the belief of the greatest good, the greatest goodness. And if we're talking about, again, what we were given in terms of what was written in the hieroglyphics, what was written for us in terms of the Rosetta Stone, the Shabaka Stone, the Rhine Papyrus, and these are just all writings that give us our history. And so I think that I just wanted to, just touch on, that point of beginning, because I think that that was what it was as far as the going back to the ancient days. And I'm just trying to, again, reflect on that from a standpoint of beginning. So I just wanted to, share those thoughts when we talk about the truth, because again, it's important for us to understand the difference between the real and the unreal. And I think that if we go to Mayat, it will start us there. You know what I mean? And then whatever was written thereafter, was things that now we look at it as we compare the Bible and we compare the Shabaka Stone. I'm done. Sorry.
Thank you. As we go back, George. Go ahead, Barbara.
Just reflecting on something George just said, talks about truth and based in fact, and the facts of honor and integrity, and talking about the Ancient of Days. You're right in that what is fact now is not necessarily what fact is. That makes sense. What is fact now? How people interpret what's truth now? How people interpret what is critical race theory, or the interpretation, however it's interpreted now. What I hear George, and also what I heard you and Ron talk about, is it's got to be based in on the original aspect of what truth is. And so just because someone calls it a fact now doesn't mean that it's a fact now. And that's why we need wisdom to show us, to take us back to that original time, that original period, that original understanding of what it truly means, instead of just accepting everything people or an entity says is a fact now. So that's the authenticity I see in the verbiage ancient of days. That which was, is, and shall be. But that mankind or humanity has removed the truth of the meaning of
Yeah.
the original meaning of that.
Yeah, and Barbara, thank you very much for sharing that, because what had lost track in my mind was the primary source versus the secondary source, the third source, the fourth source. Go to the primary source. And I think that that's where that beginning is, for us, in terms of not my truth or that, that truth, but, the truth. So I thank you for sharing that, because I wanted to make sure the primary source is what I was trying to really emphasize as far as the Shabaka stone. I'm done. Thank you.
Well, also what she just uncovered, because we said the original root talks about to advance, as well as you don't advance truth if you cover it up in something else, if you make it mean something else. So what we're doing then by going back to original, as Barb said, unless if it doesn't attain or have the original root or the original intent, then it is just a fact that you've made up, and it is not based on truth. So what we're doing now is advancing that truth, advancing those principles of what we believe in and what should have been from the beginning.
Oh,
So yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking out loud. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And what you're saying, Ron, about facts. Facts is something that, a word rather, that we use that is not spiritually based. Reality is spiritually based. And there's a difference between reality and fact. It's a fact that Jesus was born of a virgin, when the reality is that the reason they didn't understand that is because the SUN on the 25th was moving through the constellation of Virgo. And that's where they got the birth of the son being from a virgin. That's a reality. So facts, I see facts as being what? Intellectually based. Because how often are we told that it's a fact that something is bad for us because the scientists have said it. If you eat this, it's bad for you, or whatever. And then a few months later, it's a fact that it doesn't bother you. It affects you differently. Cholesterol. So no one knows what safe level of cholesterol really is. But yet they present it as a fact. There are ranges, but it's not a fact of what it is. I mean, a reality of what it actually is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
If there are questions about that, raise them, please, or comments, because I wanted to address something else that I saw there. When George was talking about the 2,000 years, that this also is a fact that we gain from religion, and it's stuck in our craw. From the creation to Moses to Abraham is 2,000 years. and from Abraham to Jesus is 2,000 years. And we have been taught that in church. And we've been taught that is fact. But if that is true, then how is it that the inscriptions that on the Sphinx is more than 2,000 years old? Because the Sphinx has been aged to be more than 18,000 years. That makes sense. So we have that stuck in our craw, and that 2,000 years came from a Catholic priest who was the chancellor at a school in Germany in the I think it's the late 1600s. George, were you about to say something?
No, no, go ahead.
But all of us have been given that, have you not?
Yeah.
1,000 years. Okay, and one of the reasons I know that we have is because not only was I taught that, I taught it until I knew better. Because it never made sense to me. And I thought it was simply intellect.
Yeah.
But it never made sense to me that you had all these ruins that were tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, and the earth only been here 6,000. That never made sense to me. I'm done.
Okay. Was someone else about to say something? Because I was going to go to the next verse. I don't want to go ahead of anyone.
I want to speak to something about noon, the waters of noon, but we're in a different direction, so I'll save that. Okay.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Because if I do that, you never will get to the late verse. Not today.
Well, I want to talk about what we're supposed to talk about. Do you feel it? If that's where you need to go.
I don't want to leave people hanging with the next verse. Go ahead.
Okay. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all people, all nations, languages might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away. His kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Based on what we've just talked about, and hopefully gained a little better understanding in verse 13, what does that say to you? We know what it says religious wise. We know that this is talking about Jesus, and you know what it's supposed to look like. But from the perspective that we're looking at now, as we've said, we're looking at reality and not facts. So if that is where we are, and based on what was said, what does this look like to you? Who is this talking to?
It's talking about humanity. It's talking about, when he talks about shall serve you, it's not talking about bowing to you in a way that is worshiping you. The energy of other people on this phone. I mean, on Zoom or the phone, the people who are here are serving those who teach and those who receive, both, because of the energy that is present. This is not a physical service that you render. It's a spiritual service. I think if we look at the word service, we will find that it does not deal with the idea of being someone submitting to us as much as us submitting to them. If someone serves you, they can reverence you without you being served in the sense that we talk about it. That too is from an Aramaic word that means to cleave to. So, meaning that those who are of all languages and all nations will cleave to you because you are their source of truth. And it's not talking about you as an individual as much as it's talking about the truth that flows from your lips. Does that make sense? Right?
Yes, sir, it does. And go ahead. Anybody else? What Pastor just said, anybody want to, any questions or? This got me a little excited. On last week, Monday, I think I mentioned something to you that got my attention. This guy had written a book about his life. He had been a soldier, and he talked about his violent upbringing, which included his father. And when he went to Vietnam, he talked about all the killing. And he said the way to do it was you had to see them as not being human. You had to see them as not being human. And he said something when his father died that really got my attention. He said he didn't so much as die as much as he never knew how to live. And that got my attention. Verse 13 to me speaks of understanding who you are and taking that journey and seeing who you are. Verse 14 speaks to me of not only walking in that, taking dominion of it, meaning you are not a dominator per se, but the domination that you dominate, the thing that you dominate is you. You dominate the mind. You put all that stuff in submission and you recognize who you are. And the glory that you see is enlightenment of who I am. And it is the life of all that we are intended to be. It is the original that we are moving to not only that Ron sees Ron and recognizes that his mind is probably not probably, but under a different mindset and could never connect to his soul unless he moved to a place where he submits his mind to a place beneath his soul or under his soul, or walk in that way that his mind does not have dominion over him or drive his thoughts every day. So when he learns to do that, then he not only becomes alive to himself, he becomes that which other nations need to see. And to me, when it talks about languages, it's saying it doesn't make a difference of anybody's culture. It doesn't make a difference if there's someone who is moving toward enlightenment, who desires to see truth, then you become a beacon to them. You become that type of light. So as you learn to submit to your, and I hate this term, but to your higher self or to your enlightened self, as we do it, then that submission is what brings about enlightenments for others to see. Not that you can do, not that you can are supposed to dominate anybody else, but that they can see the path that you have taken and learn to submit to truth themselves. And I really hope, and I think I kind of said the same thing Pastor did. I just kind of said it in a different way, using the example I did of the man from the autobiography that I read. Excuse me.
May I add something to that?
Please, sir.
The 13th verse, as you said, shows us who we are. It causes us to do an introspection, and it really shows us that we are humanity and humanity is us. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
And when we get to the 14th verse, it begins with the words he was given dominion, right?
Yes.
Both that word should have been translated as he was given the authority to govern as
Mm.
opposed to dominion.
Yeah.
And because I see this is talking about the results of you finding out who you truly are. It's the 14th verse
Yes, sir.
speaks to you, the results of you finding out who you really are. And because when you find out who you really are and you realize that you are indeed Atum, you are Elohim, I mean, Ptah, you are Elohim, right?
Yes.
Then you have, now that you realize that you are given uh, the power to govern uh, uh, what I'm sorry, you've given the power and honor to govern truth, to be the agent of truth. As I think I just said it earlier, truth is your kingdom, and you have governance over it. And again, most of these words, especially in this 14th verse, are Aramaic.
You're
So,
right.
so would that make? I mean, does that make sense? And then it says that your governance is forever. And the kingdom can't be destroyed. That's the result of you realizing who you are, because truth can't be destroyed. Can you see that, guys? Or does that make sense to you? Am I veering off course?
You're
No,
not off.
yeah,
Yeah, I see it as well.
it speaks to having tapped into what the Ancient of Days has shown you,
Yeah.
and the oneness of that, because if the Ancient of Days is remains, is, was, and shall be, and that's what you tapped into, and so that you understand that you are the same. That speaks to the limitlessness of who you are, and that dominion. Once you understand the truth, as you say, it doesn't. It has no limit. It has no time limit. It has no logistical limits. No limits placed on it by location, whatever. It just is, and it ever shall be.
Meditation, meditation, meditation. Meditation is we are there. Barb said what the Ancient of Days has shown you. We are there. What are we aware of? What do we see? We do not see fear. We do not see hesitation. We have become a verb. We are action, and we move in the direction of righteousness and peace. And as it has also been said many, many years ago, and I'm just kind of putting what Nick said in my own voice. He said, set your course to righteousness. I think it's something to that extent. And I'm saying, and just be, I'm saying the same thing. We have set our course. We have set our intent, and now move in that direction. There is nothing to fear. There is no need to worry about mistakes made, because your priorities and your desire is truth and righteousness. So we walk in that. I liken it to raising a child. You do everything you do in love, and you look back at it, and you may see some mistakes or things you may have would have done differently if you do it now from a place of more wisdom. But everything you did in love worked out. It worked for the good of the child. And that's where we are. We don't see how this thing is going to turn out. Look at the election. We don't see how this is going to turn out. But the vision is internal. The vision is looking at the kingdom. The vision is looking at what you are being shown. And you keep on with the journey. This not only marks where we are, it is an empowering type of lesson, and the wisdom that has been spoken today, I hope shows us that. And I don't know about you, but what I have seen is the amount of additional information that I gain when I go back and listen to the videos. Because while people are talking, I miss stuff and don't see things, and I go back and think, when was that said? When did he say that? So I think this was a very important lesson as to where we are right now. And anyway, that's enough for me. Anybody else? What anybody thoughts, comments?
Ron, good morning. This is Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
I have a question. I have a question, not a comment. I want a little more clarity on Ancient of Days. Are we looking at Ancient of Days as being our history of what we've learned from our understanding of who we are, or are we looking at Ancient of Days as being Insolve, and we are pulling for the macro everything that is through Insolve? I just want a little more clarity on that.
Good question, Kathy. Class, anybody want to start us?
I don't think it's insult.
Well-
Go ahead, Arch, I'm sorry.
Well, in the beginning, I said that those verses seemed to me like it was talking about, because my question was, why did they interpret it as the Ancient of Days as opposed to Yahweh or some other name like that?
Yeah.
Because I think it is a clue for us that it's going back to the beginning, back to Ptah or Ein Sof. Yeah, all the way back there to the beginning. So yes, it's Ein Sof or Ptah.
I think it's
Anyway,
Ptah.
that's what I believe.
I think it's the Ptah, because to go back to Ein Sof would mean that we are aware of everything. To go back to Ptah is no different than going back to Elohim, meaning that we are shown what Ein Sof intends for us to see. We're not one with Ein Sof, the light above all lights for everyone else. When we talk about Ein Sof, we're talking about the one who created everything that is, inclusive of Elohim, that brought everything into existence. I believe that the reason I believe that this is that we don't go that to Ein Sof because we could never be one with Ein Sof, but it does indeed go back to Ptah, because what happens is that when you look at Ptah, what you see, or when you look at Elohim, what you see is an environment that was created, and the environment that was created. What is that environment that was brought into existence? That environment is that was brought into existence is beginning, the beginning of everything that is, that created Elohim. Out of beginning, out of in the Kemetic voice, beginning, the substance of beginning is the waters of noon. So when I look at that, I see that beginning brought into existence Ptah / Elohim. And then from that came everything that was intended to be from the waters of noon. And I'll get into that if necessary in a moment. But I don't think that we actually are able to discern the mind of Ein Sof. Does that make sense?
So you're equating Ein Patah to Elohim.
Yes. And the reason I
that
said
right?
Audrey, is because what did Elohim do? Elohim spoke, right, things into existence. And when Elohim spoke things into existence, they appeared. However, if you look at Patah, out of Patah came Atum, which are the words of Patah. You see what I'm saying? So it's the speaking of Patah, so as is the speaking of Elohim that brought what we see into existence. And I will make an effort later on to in a few rather to tie all that together if I can. Does that make sense so far? Kathy, Audrey?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I see it better now, clearer, and thank you both.
George,
Thank you.
we intend to speak to it though.
I have a question, Pastor, in terms of Ein Sof.
May I hear you, George?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Could Ein Sof be considered what existed before the beginning? Could that
And
be
Ein Sof is what existed before the beginning.
that
Yeah. Ein Sof is that intelligent existence. Yeah.
great?
Kathy, did you say you were good?
Yes, that makes sense. That cleared it up. Thank you so much.
Pastor, you said you want to tie it all together?
Yeah.
I had a question. I'm sorry.
Um,
That relates directly to what you said, Pastor. Ein Sof is that which existed before beginning. Is the word Ein Sof a Hebrew word?
yeah, Ein Sof is old ancient Hebrew word that means light of all lights.
And so, what is the kinetic
Equivalent of that.
equivalent of that? Because if we talk about what we've been talking about, the Hebrews pulled any knowledge they had from what they learned from. You see what I'm asking?
Yes, I do. I
Good
do.
question. Yeah.
And I guess based on what we talked about today, we talked about facts and how things are interpreted. Is there another word or representation of what we need to be saying relative to that which is above all, is all, beyond all, other than Ein Sof? And I know why you did it, because that's the frame of reference we have for understanding as we learned what was beyond all things. But where was that pulled from? Do we know that? That's my question.
The word Ein Sof was introduced by the sages, by Jewish sages. You won't find that, at least I haven't found it, excuse me, in the Bible. And the Jewish sages extracted that from the Kemetic sense of spirituality, writings of spirituality. And they called it Ein Sof, they called it light because it was the enlightened one. It was the one who who is the enlightenment of everything that exists. It is the one who was never created, but created everything. It is the one who has always existed, yet brought existence into this space. So the word, I don't know a word for it other than the enlightenment itself, or the for lack of a better term, the totality of of wisdom, the totality of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And what we see as wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is a fraction of what actually exists. I also believe that this entity of whom we speak cannot be named nor understood beyond simply making explanations about it, as opposed to being able to define it. And when I truly think about this, I see that the space that physicality exists in is a space for itself. It would, for example, what you can go to the moon, but you can't live on the moon without artificial oxygen. This earth realm, this earth itself, was brought into existence out of the mind of the one who has a name that is unknowable or a character that is unknowable, for the express purpose of, for lack of a better term, of observing what it would, this portion of it, how it would function in this particular space that he brought into existence. And I hope I'm not sounding confused. I hope I'm not confusing anyone, but I don't think that we have a name for it, Barbara Jean. And I don't know, George, maybe if I've come across something in terms of a name for the one who exists above everything, beyond everything else, but I have not. And out of all the things that I've studied over the years, I have not found any name that makes any effort to describe the one that's beyond all existence, other than just that, the one who exists beyond everything that exists. As anyone, and Barbara Jean, does that make sense, first of all?
I understand what you're saying, and what I think I understand you is that Ein Sof is the closest thing to what we describing, to being able to put into words what that which is unknowable, not unknowable, but the unnameable one.
Yes, yes. And see, this is the other part of that. That's what makes theology so ignorant. The whole concept of theology is ignorance. Because theology is the study of God. How can you, if God is beyond you, how can you study it? So that in itself makes it crazy. Now, and if we were making any effort to understand or to study Ein Sof, that would make no sense. That's an impossibility, because as you said, it's the unnameable one. We can't give character to it because we don't know what its character could possibly be unless Ein Sof gave us that character. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we are relegated to is beginning, Elohim, and from that everything else. Any questions about that? Or does that make sense? If it's not clear, please say so.
Well, I have a question. Based on what I've been reading and looking at, my understanding is that Ptah created the other pantheon of gods that we would say is those plural gods. It's Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, Ptah is kind of the equivalent of Ein Sof.
Well, see,
But if I'm wrong, please clarify.
what I see Ptah, what happened with Ptah, Ptah brought into existence language, right? Speech. And when it talks about the pantheon of gods that it created, if you look at what we are calling the pantheon of gods, a tomb would be one of them. But a tomb is simply speech. So Elohim spoke everything into existence. Does that make sense? Both of them had spoke. The difference is that what the Kemites are saying is that Ptah, out of Ptah came the words that have been attributed to Jesus. Like, and in the beginning, he was the Word, and the Word was with him. That first in first chapter of John.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that and put Ptah there, then that shows us that it's not individual gods, is actually characteristics of Elohim or characteristics of Ptah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and I think the reason, and George, you can speak up at any point if you see something beyond what we're saying or see something that could help us out here.
So you're saying those pantheon of gods were just characteristics of
Yes.
Ptah.
Because if you look at the translation of the names of that pantheon of gods, for example, Horus is called a Haru because Horus is Greek. Horus is called the sun god or the god of the sun. Well, Haru is the energy of the sun, the S-U-N. And in scripture, it made it the S-O-N of Joseph and Mary, as opposed to Osiris and the other dude, what Osiris and, come on,
Is
Isis, yeah, the partner. I need to know that. So that even with the idea of Mary and Joseph existed, if you look at the true nature of the period when they say that this entity called Jesus was born, and as I said earlier, is when the sun stops on December 21st, and it begins to move again on December the 25th, and the first constellation moves through is the one of Virgo. And then as it moves through, George, you can stay on. After it moves through the constellations, what we begin to see is that the dog star of is the star of Sirius, and
Sirius.
that star has been said to be the star that led the wise men to where Jesus was born. Well, in Kemetic understanding, teachings rather, those three stars were called wise men. They are the wise men of the universe, and those three stars, the wise men, points towards the star Sirius, which is said to be the brightest star that led them to the manger, when in actuality, this is speaking of the heavenly bodies. So I say all that to say that if we look at what's behind each one of the names in terms of the celestial bodies, we will see that they are actually characteristics of Ptah, or characteristics of Jesus. I'm sorry, characteristics of Elohim as it was extracted from the Kemetic into the Hebrew. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Hello, can y'all hear me? This is Sheldon. Hello?
Go ahead, Sheldon.
Oh, okay. I was trying to speak earlier, but I don't think y'all could hear me for some reason on my end. A regular English phrase that I've used and I've seen as it relates to Ensoft as we're talking about it, but not Hebrew or Kemetic, is just simply all that is. As we spoke about, the unknowable, just simply that, all that is. And I was concurring with the pastor in terms of all the other gods, in a sense, that even have any type of name whatsoever. That is just the characteristics, some portion, in terms of the characters of all that is. But all that is, of course, not being able to embody any one figure of whatsoever, just because that was, as Pastor was talking about theology, that would automatically be beyond our ability to even understand in totality at any given point. Yeah, I just wanted to add that all that is.
We don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
George, I know you ready to speak when you come when your camera back on, man.
No, I was just, giving thought, Pastor, to what you was speaking about in terms of a tune, the spoken word, and a tune speaking the names of what was there from the beginning when we talk about the Nun Patah and the tune. Now, in the Shabaka stone, there is the three philosophies, and I know we talked about it a little bit, but I just want to go back to it in terms of just an overview because, in the primate of essences, it talks about the three becoming one. Okay, so what we're talking about is seeing it all originate from the Nun, which is everything that's in the universe.
George,
Yes.
may I ask you a question?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
You said the three becoming one, right?
Yes.
What are the three that becomes one? Because are we talking about the original
Trinity.
Trinity?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the original Trinity. And this is where, again, all three being one or coming from one is where we get the three philosophies of the Shabaka stone. The primate of essences, which is the Nun, which is Ptah, and which is Atum. And we know that, again, the Nun represents the matter, the substance, the watery, the wavicles. And from that, Ptah came out of the waters of Nun and became that primordial hill, became that Ptah became Elohim. And from Ptah, that energy at rest and the kinetic energy that moved matter to the atomic consciousness when we talk about the atom. So that's the spoken word. So now the spoken word gave these names to the Nun, to Ptah. And in addition, it talked about the creations. And I think this is where Audrey, we were speaking about plural. And so with Atum, spoke, you know, into the eight creations, which we'll, I believe, eventually get to when we talk about the pairs. And so when we get into the essences of um, the primate, we'll get into the four pairs. But I just wanted to, stop there because I think that if we can begin to look at the creative intelligences, and that's where, we get into the essence of the atomic consciousness. Give me 1 second. I'm just giving some thoughts. The primate of essence, the primate of essences, the essences. Okay. Bear with me, family. My mind is just flowing. But I think the important concept for me is that Atum created these creatures or these intelligences, and that's where we'll begin to talk about darkness and light. We'll begin to talk about, again, the wisdom and some of the other aspects of the atomic consciousness.
George, can I equate that? When you talk about the atum become the word, right?
Hmm.
It's no different than let there be.
Right.
Elohim saying let there be. It's no different than that. So it's so rather than say use the word patah, we can use the word Elohim, right?
Yes.
And when we use the word Elohim, then what we have been taught is that Elohim said, let there be light, and it was light, right?
Yes.
And so that is exactly what happened with the voice of Ptah. Atum is simply the voice of Ptah. That's all. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so that's so what I'm getting from what you're saying is that um, just as the word was in the beginning, with beginning, this atum, the atom, was in the beginning, with the beginning, and because it was it with the beginning, and in the beginning, nothing came into existence without it. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, I cannot quote that verse um, in its entirety as it is written, where it says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God.
Yeah. John 1:1.
Yeah, would you quote that for me, please?
Yeah. In John 1:1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God."
So in the beginning was Ptah.
Yeah.
In the beginning, in the beginning was well, I'm sorry, in the beginning was Atum, which is the word, right? And the word was Ptah. You see what I'm saying? They were one and the same. So Elohim and the word are one and the same. It is no different than you making an effort to try to separate your words from you. Your words leave your mouth, but they're still you. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yes.
And this is the same principle that's involved. And I think what makes it complicated and difficult to wrap our mind around is not what we're talking about when we're talking about what it means. It's the language barrier. Because Ptah is Kemetic, Atum is Kemetic, and not English. Elohim is Hebrew, but we are accustomed to that word because we were in the church, in the midst of religion, and we heard that word. It's a part of our vernacular, as opposed to Ptah or Atum being a part of our vernacular. Does that make sense? That's what makes it difficult to understand, to wrap our mind around, because we are not accustomed to hearing it that way. So I think that the more that we talk about it, and the more that we simplify it in terms of the correlation between Ptah and Elohim, the correlation between the word and Atum, the correlation between beginning and noon, the more we talk about that, the more that we will see that they are the same. Make sense?
Yes, it definitely makes sense, and I appreciate your clarity in terms of making it correlate with regards to, again, the facts versus the reality of how we interpreting it. And I think more importantly, as far as a tune, it talks about what we have said before about the electromagnetism and the electricity in terms of a tune creating balance, creating the pairs. And that's all, I wanted to, just speak about in terms of the essence of pre-existing order. And that's just the in terms of how we begin to see that it was balance. So just like we talk about the nun, there was the nunette. And again, and these are just the four pairs in terms of the creations that Tune talk about. uh so we'll get there as we need to, But I think that again, just trying to have the foundation is the conceptual thoughts. I'm just trying to put it in perspective when we talk about patah, or we talk about um, looking at it from the Bible written terms, if that resonates.
You understand that everything we're talking about came from the Kemetic spirituality. Everything that's in the Bible. Ron?
I can also add,
Oh, Sheldon?
hello?
No.
Yeah, I can also add something else in terms of, I don't want to say understanding this, but as we're actually going over it and we talk about the Kemetic, we talk about the Aramaic, we also think about it in the English form and trying to understand this. From the origin of it, the interaction between the person and this material was totally different as well because it was more personable and it was through, for example, the use of symbols. And so with it being through the use of symbols, it's more so that the individual was interacting in a sense with this knowledge, or the source of this knowledge in a sense was, that particular individual and what these symbols meant to them, and then came understanding. Now, how language is evolved through the Aramaic and Hebrew and what we have today, in a sense, we're having to go beyond that because we have been, in a sense, trained or raised to understand things in terms of it being told to us. And I think that's where the huge disconnect comes from. We've gone over, a lot Elohim, and now we're making another step in terms of making it even more internal, not just understanding it from an informational standpoint, but understanding in terms of experiencing the knowledge and noticing it and seeing it in ourselves, and it's actually, you, in a sense, feeling it as your personal identity or your own personal characteristics of who and what we are. So just that's what it is that we are all attempting to do, and I hope that mentioning that we'll be able to, in a sense, interact with the material in a different way, knowing that. I'm finished.
Thanks, Sheldon. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think that what Sheldon just said kind of summed up to me what you and George were saying. We in our understanding of this, we see a tune has many voices, but it's all the same voice. It sounds like James Richard, it sounds like George Clark, it sounds like Audrey, it sounds like Sheldon, but it all comes together as one. And that is the spiritualness that Sheldon speaks of, that none of those were isolated utterances that we heard. So as all of this comes together. Okay.
Yeah, I would even think, I think to piggyback on what you just said, Ron, even in terms of hearing something, and some languages still work in that way in terms of having different inflections lightly, but the vibration of the words, as we talked about at womb, etc., and then we begin to understand, okay, it's just saying, our Father out in heaven. No, this is not saying some physical words. This is basically a whole bunch of vibrations and meditations that is going on with this. This has to deal with me internally and tuning with like a certain frequency, not only as it reverberates with the universe and all that is, but also with my self. And so from an alchemy standpoint, or a point in terms of changing yourself, I am in this particular infinite moment becoming or changing myself, or experience, I would say not changing myself, but experiencing myself and creating in a totally different way. All that came from 20 years ago. Oh, we just said, Our Father who art in prayer. I mean, who art thou in heaven? Which compared to what it is that I just explained, it's so minimal. you can't even put it in words how much of a disservice it is. But of course, it's a building block, and that, just an example of not only the symbols but the vibrations and what those vibrations mean, or how they're effective, or what they're actually doing when we open ourselves up to it to be a part of it or interact with it. Finish.
Let me show you. Can I say how powerful vibrations and frequencies are? You remember when we were younger and we were in church, especially in the South, and people would start singing, and then they would stop and start humming. And the rhythm of the hum, everybody could pick up on it. The vibration of the humming, you could feel it. And even right now, thinking about it, I feel it.
Yeah.
And that is because all of us were functioning on the same frequency. And no words were being said at all, but everyone knew what was being said. And it was not you didn't know what was being said because you heard it. You knew what was being said because you were experiencing it. Does that make sense? You guys remember that when you were younger?
It was beautiful as a little child to feel that, to be
Yeah.
let that pick you up and carry you. That, yeah, I remember that.
I remember
All right.
when African churches, black churches, did not want carpet on the floor because the wooden floors is where they got the rhythm.
Yeah.
I mean, it was,
Yeah.
and to have not experienced that makes it difficult for you to understand if you've never experienced that. But that's the idea. That's what I see when I think of frequency, rhythm, and vibration.
Now, what you just said, and I did the same thing as well, but it also shows how time is, we think we were talking about like a week ago in terms of time and space. Automatically doing that, time no longer existed, and all time existed at the same time, because we were right back there to that moment that you were actually talking about with all those together. So that the specific example that was just, in a sense, you created that experience or had that experience, you had that experience along with something that was totally in the past, but you were there in the present. So that time in the past, that moment or whatever is present. Everything that always existed and always will exist has always existed, all of them together. Done.
Beautifully said. Thank you. I have a question, and I want to make sure we've exhausted this because it's something different. And I don't know, I keep forgetting to ask this, and I don't know if there's something more. I want to make sure we are at in our discussion where we should be as far as understanding. And before I ask this question, or do you want me to save it for tomorrow? I'm gonna try to save it for tomorrow if I can remember it. But a lot has been said today, and maybe it's a good place to stop and kind of reflect. If we will, tomorrow, I like to do this, Pastor. I have a question I want to ask, and you mentioned a summation that you want to do on what we talked about today. You want to do it now, or would that hold till tomorrow? We want to begin there tomorrow?
It's not going to take but 5 minutes.
Okay.
What we talked about today primarily, especially with the springboard being the 2 verses in Daniel. What we talked about is recognizing the essence of who we were created to be, not only recognizing but embracing it.
Yeah.
And once we embrace that, a hunger ensues, and that hunger is to know more about yourself. And this in itself brings clarity to the eye. The pineal gland opens up to you, and you're able to experience spirituality. And once you have embrace that as a reality, it is then that you begin to see that you are teaching truth, and the whole of humanity is clinging to you because you are saying something that they are hungry for but have not heard before. They know it's real because it resonates so deeply with them. And the them of whom I speak is humanity, and the humanity of whom the humans of whom I speak is only the spiritual essence of them. And that's what we're talking about when we put things in the macro. When you know who you are, you know that we are one spirit, that we are in separate bodies. So when we put truth in the macro, what we're actually doing is speaking to the spiritual essence of all of humanity. And that is the reason a person in China can receive what's being said in America, and he hears it in Chinese, even though it's spoken in English, because it's not a hearing with your ear, it is an experience with your soul. That's what those two verses spoke to me about today.
Wow, thank you. Like that. Maybe it's a good place to call it a day. Any questions or comments on what Pastor just said?
I also want to talk about tomorrow the relationship between ancestors and new. When people transition, where do they go? Where are the ancestors? And where do they live? Where do they exist? That's what I want to talk about.
Okay. That was kind of my question, and we can get into it tomorrow, but mine is about ancestors. We've been taught not to worship things, and rightfully so, but altars or this or that or pictures or whatever. But when I think about ancestors, I'm not sure I'm there yet in my meditations. And I wonder, is it wrong to have something visual that I can see? Would that be considered, So I want to talk about that a little bit. And maybe I'm where I need to be and don't realize it. But I just think that will help me. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. But we've said enough today, and maybe unless it's something you want to address, Pastor.
Oh, no. I just smiled because of what you said about objects.
Yeah. So I hope everybody has a thought. Appreciate your energy, all your thoughts and your questions. We're in a good place, and we're all bringing in a new year, and I think we couldn't be having a better start to this year. So thank you. Keep up with your meditations. If you feel like it, go back and listen to the videos and see if you have questions. Okay. Love y'all. Have a great day. Look forward to tomorrow.
Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, family.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.